Chapter 111. It had been a long while since a steady blip had appeared on the heart rate monitor. Outside the estate, Cillian stared at the expanse of sky stretching toward the west. The general star had, at the end of the day, fallen. Rumble, rumble. A loud clap of thunder rumbled, seemingly to send off the highly decorated god of war. Multiple large, dark clouds also appeared in the sky. The day turned to night in an instant. Gusts of winds blew from all directions while sheets of rain poured down. It was as if the sky was in mourning as well. Cillian sighed. Heaven's will cannot be disobeyed. Jade, Henderson, and the heads of all 5 elite families shuddered. Zachariah's hands, which were at the small of his back, slowly slid downward. A look of bewilderment also appeared on Scotty's charming face. She found it hard to believe that the warden of the Northern Territory, who had been making merry conversations at the Lee family's home yesterday, was now deceased. The warden had protected his family and country spectacularly. He had bid farewell to the world of the living. Tears welled in Scotty's eyes, and she started sniffling. Nash retrieved a mat from the bedroom and spread it on the ground. Then, he placed Felix's body on the straw mat. The head of the Lane family, Howard Lane, stormed over when he saw what was going on. Bastard. You killed the honorable warden, and now you're placing his corpse on the ground. Do you know what you're doing? As one of the senior presidents of the 9th Division of the Green Bamboo Association and one of the 5 business magnates, Howard had an intense, majestic aura about him. Last night, his beloved crow had received a blow to its head. Just moments ago, he had received a picture that one of his men from the Green Bamboo Association had snapped. The culprit that had struck his crow's head was Nash, who was standing right before him. He had been cleared, so naturally, he would not be talking about the crow. He had to find some other excuse. Nash walked over to Brian and picked up the offering bowl placed there. Who said the warden is dead? Howard sneered. Could Father Cillian be lying? Given his status, he naturally knew how capable Father Cillian was. Father Cillian had stated heaven's will could not be disobeyed. Did that not mean the warden had passed away? Nash ignored Howard and continued fiddling with the bowl. Howard's fury turned even greater when he saw how this youngster, who was even younger than his grandchildren, was ignoring him. Why aren't you saying anything? Aren't you going to explain anything to us? Nash looked at Howard as if he were an idiot. You're barking your head off like a rabid dog. What could I possibly have to say to you? A look of terror appeared on Scotty's face when she heard the way Nash was speaking to Howard. The head of the Lane family was a force to be reckoned with. Not only was he the senior president of Green Bamboo's 9th Division, but he was also the head of one of the 5 elite families. Not even Walter, the richest man in the country, dared mess with Howard. Walter might be able to wield his power over Howard in the business sphere, but Howard had the support of the Green Bamboo Association. This huge underground force was not something the Watson family could easily deal with. You bastard! How dare you insult me? Howard's body shook with rage, and several bodyguards immediately walked over. Nash smiled a slight smile. I'm calling you an asshole because you asked for it. Howard's fury blinded him, and he roared. Grab him and break his legs. The bodyguards who were grandmasters sprang into action. Joseph sneered. I'd like to see who dares lay a finger on Nash. Several of the Lee family's guards appeared out of nowhere and came to a stop before the Lane family's guards. Stephen spoke. I think what Howard said makes sense. This young man murdered the warden, and that's a serious crime. The Quinn family guards hurried forth when they heard that. Walter and Sheldon Dorson, head of the Dorson family, did not plan to get involved. Stella roared. Lane, what the hell are you trying to do? I'll kill you this very minute. Chapter 112. Stellar was a man who did as he said. He took his pistol and aimed it at Howard's head. Howard shuddered in fear when he saw the black-colored muzzle. No one had ever dared point a gun at him in the past 70 years he had been alive. Yet now, he did not have the guts to lose his temper when a gun was pointed at him. Deep within his heart, he knew without a doubt that not only did Stellar dare point a gun at him, but he was also brazen enough to pull the trigger and kill him. Colonel, sir, Howard stuttered, unable to form a complete sentence. The poor had no power over the rich, and the rich had no power over the government. Although he held extremely powerful positions in Johnford, they were nothing in comparison to the power the Northern Territories colonel had. For the sake of his life, he had no choice but to admit defeat. "Get the hell out!" Stella roared. Howard hurriedly left the room with his family's guards. While that was going on, Nash had placed 36 offering bowls around Felix's body. Lloyd exclaimed, "These offering bowls are placed according to the 36 deacon stars' positions. It looks like a magic circle." Cillian, who had not had any emotion on his face before this, gasped, "It's the deacon soul locking formation." Lloyd was shocked. "Deacon soul locking formation?" Cillian nodded. "I don't think he's faking it. The deacon soul locking formation goes against the laws of nature. Getting a few years shaved off your life constitutes a light punishment, and the worst punishment would be getting cursed by the gods. I can't believe Master Calcraft passed on the technique to this young man." When Cillian finished his sentence, he kindly asked, "Young man, are you sure you want to use the deacon soul locking formation?" Nash ignored Cillian and walked toward the couch, where he retrieved a brush, a bottle of red-colored ink, and a stack of parchment paper from the tote bag lying on the coffee table. A frosty expression appeared on Scotty's face when she noticed how arrogant Nash was acting. Before meeting the smiling Grim Reaper, Father Cillian had been the man she admired. He was a 9th Division Grandmaster, which made him one of the best in the martial arts world. Moreover, he had gorgeous features that made him look like he had just walked out of a painting. There was no doubt he would have attracted large numbers of female fans if he decided to share his knowledge with those in the secular world. Nash might have excellent martial arts skills, but he was nothing more than a Stage 3 Grandmaster to Scotty. What right did he have to ignore Father Cillian? Scotty huffily retrieved her phone and began complaining to Hira. Lloyd could not stand Nash's disrespect and berated him. "Young man, he's the priest of the Quiet Winds Church and a 9th Division Grandmaster. He possesses outstanding skills and is giving you these reminders from the goodness of his heart." Nash ignored the exasperated Lloyd and used his brush to sketch an outline on the parchment paper. "Oh, my fucking God. Are you even listening to me? Kenneth!" Nash lifted his gaze and directed a blast of inner energy toward Lloyd. Lloyd let out a muffled grunt as he stumbled several steps backward, blood oozing from the corners of his mouth. It was only then he recalled his junior had once reminded him that this young man had genuine profound state powers. Cillian tightened his grip on his horsetail whisk. Even though he only had the powers of a 9th grade Grandmaster, he still stood a fighting chance if they were combined with the techniques his ancestors had passed down to him. Nash turned to look at Cillian. "If you do not have any other business here, please leave the room so you don't disrupt the warden's rest." Cillian said calmly, "The General's star has fallen, and heavens will cannot be disobeyed. Only Master Calcraft, who has the apocalyptic star in his palace of fate, can change one's destiny against all odds." He wanted Nash to back down of his own accord and was also taking this opportunity to undermine his confidence. The young man needed a lesson taught to him because of how arrogant he was. Nash sighed and put his brush down. Then he took a folded yellow robe from the tote bag. A beretta, a golden-colored amulet. Nash straightened up and put the robe on. The beretta went on his head, and the amulet was wound around his waist before he tightened the sash. Finally, he took a small pouch out of the tote bag. Chapter 113. The pouch held 81 copper coins. After giving them a shake, the 81 copper coins combined together to form a 3-foot-long copper sword. The cassock, the golden-colored amulet, heaven and earth. A shocked look appeared on Cillian's previously neutral face. Lloyd could not help but shudder. Nash stared deep into Cillian's eyes as he asked coolly, "Can't I be Master Calcraft?" His master had passed down all his skills to him since the year he learned to walk and talk. He had been 3 years old when he started learning. His third eye was activated, and the apocalyptic star had entered the Palace of Fate. The year he turned 15, he had helped multiple villages in the north solve the paranormal problems they were facing and received the golden-colored amulet from the National Association of Priests. A thought seemed to strike Cillian as he asked in shock, Are Are you Master Calcraft? Many years ago, an extremely talented young master surprised everyone with his appearance in the north. The master claimed his teachings were according to the southern branch, and the locals addressed him as Master Calcraft out of respect. Priests wore different colored robes based on their ranks. High-ranking priests wore red-colored robes. He and Lloyd wore purple-colored robes because their ancestors had been masters who wore yellow-colored robes and golden amulets. Meanwhile, priests who had acquired the golden master amulets of their own accord wore yellow-colored robes. My master has begun his latest journey with God. Since I am inheriting his robes, should I also take his surname? You may address me as Master Calcraft if you wish. As for Master Nash, that's the name I used in the past. Nash placed the copper sword on the coffee table. Then, he sat down with his legs crossed beneath him and continued sketching on the parchment paper. Cillian was stunned. It took him a while before he finally understood everything he had just been told. He clasped his hands together and bowed to Nash before leaving the room. Nash added, "Purple star astrology tells me that the fall of the general star means an important and long-term official will arise. Coupled with the apocalyptic star, it means the general star is yet to completely fall." Cillian shuddered as he hurried toward the outside of the estate. He activated his third eye and looked toward the west once again. A seven-colored apocalyptic star had, without him realizing it, materialized next to the general star. It seemed that he truly had the apocalyptic star in his palace of fate. Nash took a deep breath as a slight, sad smile appeared on his face. Did there truly exist people who dared go against heaven's will in this world? Inside the mansion, Stellar was ecstatic. "Nash, I didn't know this was one of your identities as well." Though he did not know how powerful Nash's robes made him, he had seen the priest of the Quiet Winds Church bow to him. From that, he could tell Nash was more powerful than those who donned purple-colored robes. Nash said quietly, "Keep it down." Stellar said excitedly, "God is merciful. The warden can be saved. The warden can be saved." Walter gulped. His mouth had become exceedingly dry. It was just as well that Nash was a miracle doctor, but he was also a master who had earned the golden amulet. He had already begun planning how he could get his precious granddaughter to get married to Nash. Zachariah rubbed a hand across his chin and asked quietly, "Scotty, Nash and Hira have not registered their marriage yet, have they?" He was well aware of Nash's three identities: a miracle doctor, the smiling Grim Reaper, and a master who held a golden amulet. Any one of those identities was enough to shock someone to their core. Though his immature ideas were somewhat unethical, he decided to try setting them up together for the sake of his granddaughter's lifelong happiness. Scotty was still in shock. She had only just finished typing out her complaints to Hira when Nash began putting on his yellow-colored robe. After gulping, she texted Hira, "Hira, treat everything I sent you just now as a bunch of bullshit." Chapter 114. Hira immediately replied, "What's the matter?" Scotty's hands were trembling, and she decided to send Hira a voice message instead. "Your boyfriend is a golden amulet master." "What's that?" "I have no clue either, but I know it means he's incredibly powerful. Even Father Cillian of the Quiet Winds Church has to bow to him when they meet." "Really?" "Yes. I saw it myself." When Zachariah saw his granddaughter happily talking to Hira, he could not help but smile sadly while dispelling his thoughts. Stellar gazed at the warden who was lying amidst the offering bowls and wiped away tears of happiness. Nash had been concentrating on the sketch he was making on the parchment paper when his grip on the brush suddenly faltered. The red-colored ink immediately left a massive red dot on the parchment paper. Brian asked hesitantly, "Grandmaster, why do you seem uneasy?" Stellar turned to look at Nash when he heard that. "I sense a murderous aura." Nash balled up the parchment paper and threw it into the trash before retrieving a fresh piece of parchment paper. Stellar said confidently, "You can focus on completing the sketch. Let us deal with whatever's going on outside. I will not allow anyone to step in here as long as I live." He grabbed his gun and headed outside once he finished speaking. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but the sky had already turned pitch black, seemingly readying itself for an even greater thunderstorm. "Stay inside the mansion, Scotty. It's dangerous outside. Zachariah walked out of the mansion, making sure Scotty was still inside before closing the door. Howard, Walter, and Sheldon stood outside and discussed amongst themselves before deciding to leave their family's experts behind while they left. No one knew if the warden could be brought back to life, and they did not want to lose their lives to the blood fiends. Boom! 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 Lightning flashed while thunder rumbled. Gusts of winds blew as massive droplets of rain poured from the skies. The mansion's lights flickered, and all the wires began sparking, plunging the Zell estate into darkness. Only the occasional streaks of lightning that flashed and illuminated the night sky made it possible to make out what was nearby. Swoosh! A person dressed in black suddenly emerged from amongst the puddles on the ground. They drove the straight-edged sword they held in their hands right toward Henderson. Henderson was merely an ordinary person, and there was no way he could react in time. Cillian jumped in front of Henderson and whirled his horsetail whisk, wrapping the white-colored hair that looked exactly like a horse's tail around the sword. Then, he reached out and shoved the person. The person dressed in black flew backward when Cillian's palm came into contact with their chest. Then, they disappeared into the rain. Terranova ninja techniques, Cillian whispered before pinching his fingers together. When he unfurled his palms, multiple pieces of parchment paper appeared on the sleeves of his robe. Flames nipped away at the paper and illuminated the estate. 30 people dressed in black and wielding various knives appeared on the walls and raced over. The Martial Arts Association's grandmasters and experts also joined the battle. Additionally, the Quiet Winds Church's 18 red-robed priests also grabbed their sabers and joined in. However, these people dressed in black all had Grandmaster-level skills. A dozen martial arts grandmasters got their throats slit in the blink of an eye. Stellar, Henderson, Grant, and Joseph's faces paled in shock. Initially, they had thought they could ward off the killers since they had experts from the Martial Arts Association and Association of Priests. They had not been expecting these killers to be so powerful. Kill anyone you see on sight. The leader of the Terranova ninjas spoke in a frosty voice. The 30 killers immediately set out on a cold-blooded massacre. Cillian and Lloyd dashed into the courtyard and managed to stop more than 20 killers. Meanwhile, the remaining killers dashed toward Stellar and the rest. One of them had a dagger, and it was merely inches away from sinking into Stellar's chest. George dashed over and raised one of his legs to give the hand holding the dagger a ruthless kick. Crack! The kick broke the killer's wrist bones into tiny pieces. Jensen sent 2 killers flying backward in one go using nothing but his bare hands. Chapter 115. When Scotty opened the door, she was greeted by the sight of the corpse of one of the Grandmasters from the Martial Arts Association. Mr. Cox! Tears streamed down Scotty's face when she saw the familiar face. She did not have time to wallow in her sadness, though. She hurriedly yelled toward Stellar and the others, who were still outside, "Colonel, come into the mansion." Stellar shook his head. "No, I must stand guard outside." Henderson yelled, "Colonel, let's hurry on in. We are no match for these people." Stellar said angrily, "I made a promise to Nash. Unless I'm dead, no one will be able to." Bang! Scotty used the side of her palm to land a strike on Stellar's neck. She was a martial artist who had reached 4th Division in her energy after all. It was pretty easy for her to knock an ordinary person out. Henderson and Joseph picked Stellar up and dragged him back into the mansion together. Grant hurried back into the mansion and immediately retrieved his phone to inform everyone in his family that they were not allowed to leave or enter the estate without explicit permission. Scotty glanced out worriedly. There were anywhere between 40 to 50 people in battle out there, but she had not seen any sign of her grandfather. She hurriedly closed the doors when she saw a killer running toward where she stood. Crack! A sharp combat knife pierced through the sandalwood door and flew toward Scotty's throat. Scotty had sharp reflexes and immediately leaned backward. The blade brushed right past her, nearly grazing the tip of her nose. Nash also completed his final sketch at that very moment. He turned and threw the brush he had been holding, and it pierced through the door with a whoosh. The brush pierced the throat of the killer who was outside. Fear appeared in his eyes as he let go of his combat knife and clapped both hands to his throat while stumbling backward, and he collapsed into a pile of water turned red by his blood. Nash handed the 36 pieces of parchment paper to Brian, put one into each of the offering bowls. Do they need to be burnt? No, just make sure they're fully immersed in the oil. All right. Brian carefully placed the parchment paper into the offering bowls. Meanwhile, Nash took bunches of copper coins strung with red string from his tote bag. The longer pieces of string were 50 inches long and had 4 copper coins attached. Shorter pieces were 25 inches long, and 2 copper coins were attached. Nash draped the strings around the offering bowls. When Brian finished putting the paper into the bowls, Nash also marked a magic circle around the offering bowls using the red strings. Brian jumped out from the magic circle. Nash retrieved a wine flask from his bag and took a sip before spraying the alcohol onto the heavenly sword. The heavenly sword, which was made from interconnected pieces of coins, glowed like red-hot iron. Oh, boundless heaven and earth, lend me your powers. Heavenly spirit seal spell. Reverse the world of the living and the dead. Nash mumbled the incantations as he used a heavenly sword to draw what he had sketched on the parchment paper in the air. The magic circle slowly rose into the air, and the 36 offering bowls soon followed suit. The mat in the middle also floated in the air alongside the magic circle and offering bowls. Scotty's mouth hung open as she watched. She had thought Nash was just putting on airs when he donned his robe. She had not expected Nash to actually know how to cast such magic. All of a sudden, Nash seemed extremely handsome to her. No, he's Hera's boyfriend. I can't think such thoughts. Scotty shook her head and hurriedly stored such unrealistic thoughts in the back of her mind. She quietly took her phone out so she could take a picture of Nash. Brian's admiration for Nash became even more fervent. Grant and Joseph could not stop gulping. Oh! Scotty let out an abrupt scream. Her phone landed on the ground with a thud. Joseph jumped in shock and hurriedly asked, What's the matter? Scotty's face had turned pale, and there was a dull look in her eyes. It was as if her soul had left her body. Nash shouted, Everyone, close your eyes, and don't open them no matter what you hear.